We continue to gain momentum as our wonderful members spread the word about this meeting format, and we have a great program ahead. A few housekeeping items. To keep the ambient sound to a minimum during today's program, everyone except our presenters will be on the listen-only mode. This should help alleviate background noise. If you have a question during the program, please utilize the chat function at the bottom or side of your screen. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the program. First, though, we have a lot to be thankful for. So Sean Mulholland is here to offer our invocation. Sean, can you hear me?
Yes, Tom, thank you.
Thank you.
Please pray with me. On another beautiful Jacksonville day, let us give thanks for our many blessings. As we persevere to resume our daily operations and activities, let us be mindful of those who have tough recovery challenges ahead. Let us be very thankful for the valiant responses of so many, especially our medical providers and first responders. Let us give thanks to our city, state, and federal leaders who have endeavored to do what they believe is right for us and best for us. Although we may not have the pleasure of in-person lunch meetings recently, we give thanks to our Rotary leadership for finding a way for us to stay connected. Please bless us. We ask that the poor and hungry have a greater share of your blessings. Amen. Thank you, Tom.
Amen. Thank you, Sean. Our prior Zoom meetings have been a huge hit, and they are available by video and listed on our website. We're continuing to update our website. I see Bill is on the call. Bill, thank you so much for all you're doing, updating our website daily. I want to also thank all the volunteers who are working behind the scenes. At 8:30 a.m. tomorrow, Jenny Jett, Sarah Olson, and Kelly Shaw will host and moderate our first Zoom Club Social. Each of you were emailed logins last Thursday from Kelly Shaw, but look for another email this afternoon. Kelly tells me we already have a terrific turnout. Allison DeFoor is an Episcopal priest and serves as the canon to the ordinary to the Bishop of the Diocese of Florida. He has an extensive background in criminal justice, including serving as a prosecutor, public defender, judge, and elected sheriff of Monroe County. A former law professor, he was the founding chair of the Project on Accountable Justice at FSU. He has degrees in law, criminology, and theology. He's not only a member of our club, but he's a past president of the Upper Keys Rotary. I give you Father Allison DeFoor, who will introduce today's speaker. Allison?
Thank you, President Tom. It's a true honor and pleasure to be able to introduce Randy, my wife, as both a longtime Rotarian and as a very proud husband. I moved here after leaving political life following 10 years of prison ministry in the Tallahassee area, and Amy Austin Slater called one day and said that there was this woman that I just had to meet because we'd have so much in common, and she was quite right about that. Turned out quite well. I'm glad I moved to Jacksonville. It's been very, very good to me. Randy is a fifth generation Jacksonvillian and is the mother of three. A son who is in New York is an investment banker, a son who's a teacher, and a daughter who's at Tulane. And I have three, so we have six in total. We're quite busy with that. And her family have deep roots in Jacksonville. Her parents are Rip Pointevent, lawyer, and Marion Barnett Pointevent. Her grandfather Pointevent was a developer who developed much of Venetia, and her grandfather Barnett had a bank. And at her core, these traditions make her a businesswoman with a law degree. She came out of the University of the South, which is its own kind of curious institution. The faculty and some of the students wear robes to class, and went to Cumberland Law School, went out, was in private practice, and then with Regency Centers, and then ultimately now is with a senior vice president and agency counsel at Fidelity, a Fortune 500 company based here in Jacksonville, Florida. I must say, when Tom and some others started thinking about whether they needed who might be the next city councilor in this district, I approached the idea of Randy doing it with some trepidation, having spent some time on that road myself and seeing how many people end up in dead ends in it. And I remember distinctly thinking how ill-suited Randy was by temperament for politics, because she is brutally honest the political world doesn't favor honesty. And she's extremely direct. And of course, the political world loves nuance, alleged nuance. She is factually driven, and politics is rarely, although we seem to be getting a little better. And she has a very, very strong sense of right and wrong, which in politics, it's a lot more gray is sold. As we talked it through, I began to realize how deep her commitment was to her children and to her city, and by extension to the children of our community who too often go away either being lost on the streets or being lost to other cities. And I realized that she came from a tradition that offered itself in American politics all the way back to the founding of our republic. There's a group called the Order of the Cincinnati, which exists to this very day, consisting of the eldest descendant of the people who fought in the American Revolution on both the American and the French side. And it's been passed down from generation to generation. It's in Washington, D.C., right across from the Cosmo Club, and it is quite distinguished, and it was modeled after Cincinnatus, who was not the emperor of Rome, but actually the dictator, which was an elected office elected by the Senate in times of great peril. They entrusted all of the responsibility to one person. And after it was over, he had served a total of 28 days on 2 occasions. They asked him to stay in some capacity. And he said, no, I'm going back to the farm, and I'll see you at the Senate occasionally. And that long tradition in American governance of citizen soldiers, citizen political servers who serve with a servant's heart and go back is that which I'm proud to say my wife embodies. And I'm delighted to introduce her now to speak to you. Fellow Rotarians, I give you Randy DeFoor.
For sharing one screen. So thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Allison. I'm especially grateful since we've been quarantined together for over a month. So for being so nice, I really am appreciative. I want to say, first of all, it's a distinct pleasure to be here and speak to you today. And when I first started talking to President Tom in the early fall of 2019 about this subject matter, we decided I would speak on it in May. So here we are. And I thought, honestly, I'd be talking to you about the water aspect of the JEA. I don't think that either Tom or myself would have ever thought in a million years that the JEA would have, the facts of the JEA and how it unfolded. We would have never guessed how this whole thing would have, the result of it. So with that, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the JEA. I'm going to talk about it, as Allison said, from a business perspective and the realm of factual timeline. And I thought it would be really fun to put these facts up against the Rotary's 4-way test. So how about that? Let's give it a go. So the JEA was the defining issue of my first year, and I think it was that of the entire council. It was a decision that would have been felt by our grandchildren, so it was incredibly important that we had to get it right. It was truly a legacy decision. Let me first set the stage of where this was originally presented to the City Council. When I talk about the City Council, I'm talking about the City Council that I joined. So before we were even sworn in the office, and that was in July of 2019, the JEA had hired many law firms, including the law firm of Pillsbury out of New York, to start this process. We now know that the Pillsbury firm was actually hired back in November of 2018, the same month and year that Aaron Zahn became the permanent CEO of the JEA. In addition, several other law firms, including some local firms, were brought in, including the Nixon Peabody in the early 2019 timeframe. So the City Council, as I mentioned, was sworn in July of 2019. And that same month, actually that same day, believe it or not, July 23rd, the first time that the City Council met in its entirety, in its whole, was the same day that the JEA board voted to approve the ITN process that started us down this very rocky path. I hope most of you know that the ITN stands for Intent to Negotiate, which is usually used for circumstances of genuine discussion on how to proceed on a given set of facts. At this time, the JEA board didn't just pass the ITN, it also passed the Performance Unit Plan, or the PUP, which was a long-term incentive plan, as well as at the same board meeting, July 23rd, 12 members of the leadership team had approved lucrative employment contracts. So none of these actions ever had before been done in the history of the JEA. Never had there been an ITN process wrapped up in procurement laws. Never had they done a long-term incentive plan, and never before had leadership contracts been passed. In other words, there was one leadership contract and it was always only with the CEO. At the same time, you may recall that the City Council was immediately placed in a cone of silence. And at that time, this is what I would have been able to talk to you about. Literally nothing. It took a couple of us, I being one, I reached out to several constitutional lawyers to fight back and say this is not right. And I think this was the first step in uncovering what was truly happening in this process. So let's look at what happened, when it happened, and how did we get here. And let's start with Aaron Zahn. So Aaron Zahn was hired in November of 2018 as a permanent CEO of the 8th largest municipally owned utility in the country by the JEA board. Aaron Zahn had no electrical utility experience, none. At that same time, representations were being made that the JEA was in a death spiral. These statements were first issued by then Chair Alan Howard and further repeated by the leadership team that the sky was falling, sales were down due to energy efficiencies, and costs were going up and jobs were being eliminated. The Civic Council, comprising of 80 plus CEOs who had been working on this issue since the Anna Brochet days, and after an 18-month review with industry experts, said that this was completely false. We now know that Howard was also negotiating to be hired as legal counsel for the JEA. Marketing firms were also brought in using taxpayer dollars to work the community over with scare tactics, and false statements on commercials and bill inserts occurred. I don't know how many of you got the bill inserts. I did not. I thought that was kind of funny that I did not get one of them. In the fall of 2019, as the bids were starting to roll in, we realized then that there was a conflict of interest. Carla Miller worked hard to ensure that the 3 top JEA executives who were negotiating were removed because they would obviously benefit. And so then 3 individuals from the mayor's office were selected. These 3 individuals had no billion-dollar negotiating experience, which was incredible considering PFM, which was a public asset manager, had described the JEA sale as the largest and most complex municipal power sale in US history. We also saw at that time powerful political consultants from Tallahassee being hired by the JEA to campaign our community, and what I believe was in preparation of a ballot vote. It was learned that the Performance Unit Plan, or PUP, presented by JEA executives and passed by the JEA board was done so without either legal approval or city council approval. We learned later that this plan would have resulted in hundreds of millions of dollars to the personal benefit of the very people who were negotiating the deal. To emphasize how unethical this plan was, the low dollar amount for the buy-in, which was $10, had been determined after JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley had given their market research analysis on value. So senior management would have had to have known that it was going to be a very big payday. At that time, we start to see business persons who may not have believed that government should be in the utility business. Even they started to cry foul and to request termination of the process. We saw demands for a grand jury investigation being made by former general counsel Rick Mullaney and business leaders, such as former CSX CEO Michael Ward. JEA representatives went on the radio and stated that they didn't have to provide our city council auditor with any information requested. And that was important because our city auditor is the one that really allowed us to see what truly was going on. We also learned at that same time that words such as Project Scampy and Freebird were code names given to protect the sale negotiations by the JEA from the public. In other words, it appears that they were actively trying to hide information from discovery requests. In the fall, negotiations with potential buyers were moved by Zahn from Jacksonville to Atlanta, which meant that City Council had to pay for our ethics officer to go to Atlanta, which was a fight to get funding. This fight was going on as the City Council struggled to hire its own legal counsel. Ultimately, Steve Busey, one of our city's best legal minds, was hired. And then the City Council, led by Roy Diamond and Ron Salem, had a public hearing on the performance unit plan, and words such as legal theft were used. Aaron Zahn was terminated and ultimately terminated for cause. Over the course of months, the JEA had been listening to no one, not to the top CEOs, not to former mayors, not to former general counsel, not to our city auditor, not to former city council presidents, not to the First Amendment Foundation, our paper, Riverkeepers, and most importantly, not to the citizens of Jacksonville. The arrogance was really frightening. The process was a flawed one, and I believe the reason the process was so flawed is because it was never intended to be an honest process. It was designed instead for a certain outcome. So, using our four-way test, number one, is it the truth? No. This whole exercise was built on a house of intentional misrepresentations or common terms lies with no transparency or integrity. As you know, this ITM process was finally formally terminated on December 24th. And now the City Council has an investigative committee. I'm on that committee as well as Roy Diamond and Brenda Priestley Jackson. And we're looking into who knew what when. This has been very challenging. We still have not received, it was represented that they had pulled 3 million documents in relation to the 82 items requested. We found out just Friday that they only had pulled 170,000 documents. And Steve Busey and his team is working through that now. We continue to interview individuals who were a part of it or connected with it, and we will continue to do so. We are now focused on the 3 negotiators, and hopefully we'll focus on the board next. So let's look at the truth. The Nelson Mullins firm, in an effort to be hired by the council, did an in-depth review of the information presented to the board upon which they agreed to an ITM process, and found that Zahn represented an 8% reduction in sales by year 2030, at the same time that he had forecasted a 10-year site plan with the Public Service Commissions and showing continued growth at 5%. No truth there. Zahn and Wanamaker, the CFO, also represented past lost sales of 4.2% by using a very small time frame when in fact retail sales had grown 7 out of the 8 past years due to customer growth and increased degree days, which had outpaced energy efficiencies. No truth there. The data shows, in fact, that every other 10-year site plan filed in the state of Florida by electric utilities had showed positive projections. Finally, the bids had said it all. Nelson Mullins concluded that management presented selective historic information without proper context and a management projection that provided a contrived negative narrative regarding the future of the JEA to drive the board to explore a sale. In other words, there's no present death spiral, there's no gloom and doom scenario. And don't forget, this was all done hand in hand with that performance unit plan. Other facts that have come to light in the investigative committee is that we've learned that the law firm of Nixon Peabody gave guidance in April of 2019 that any type of long-term incentive plan where phantom stock was created would be illegal. We have also come across emails alluding to spreadsheets by Ryan Wanamaker in the same time frame, setting out how much the leadership team would stand to benefit from such a plan. So let's get to the second question from our 4-way test. Is it fair to all concerned? No. Let's be honest, this whole PUP mess was an attempt at a corporate raid, which would have made a handful of people very rich in the event of a sale. The problem was that the JEA is a public utility and it belongs to all of us, not to the handful of people, some of whom didn't even live in Jacksonville. What can we learn from this? The City Council is working diligently to ensure this does not happen again by making charter changes. Some of these you will see on the ballot in the fall. We recently passed a charter revision that removes half of the JEA appointees from the mayor and gives them to the council. We are now requiring all requests by the city auditor to be responded to in 2 business days. We have strengthened the Office of Ethics to ensure that they can request information in an investigation like the Inspector General. Through Michael Borland's committee, we will continue to work on positive solution. Now that a federal subpoena has been issued, there has been some question as to why the investigative committee should continue. Some in the business community believe it hurts Jacksonville. I would argue that if we stop this committee, we may never know who, what, when, and where, and that leaves us open to the opportunity for something like this to happen again. And that puts Jacksonville in a much worse position. I ran for office because I believe Jacksonville is a gem and I want my children to have opportunities to come home to. But if we don't address some of the issues that have been exposed by this JEA debacle, I believe there's less opportunity for them. The areas that the federal subpoena focus on is the ITN, the PUP, bidders, the Innovation Summit, Innovation Alliance of Florida, Inc., and selection of Aaron Zahn as CEO, and finally, IPO information. So this brings us to the third question of the 4-way test. Did it build goodwill and better friendships? I was talking to the head of the union over one of the unions of the JEA over the weekend concerning Melissa Dyke's termination last week and her goodbye piece in the TU. Allison, my husband, and I discussed the fact that this article contained 20 I's, and not one of them was, "I am sorry." To which this union leader said, Melissa still doesn't own her part, and there is no I in team. When I originally scheduled this talk, like I said, I really genuinely thought I'd be talking about water, something that was really never discussed. You know, the conversation about selling the JEA seems to come up every 10 years or so. There may be a case at some point in time to have a mature discussion on the sale of electricity. However, I would argue we should never, under any circumstances, sell our water rights and sewer infrastructure. This is an area today of grave concern. As Mark Twain said, whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. Bottom line, if we lose control of our water rights, we're fools and we have forfeited our future. There are today 22 million people in Florida and the state is running out of water. North Florida has the water and Central and South Florida have great demands because they have the people. Figure it out. And if you get confused, ask the folks in Apalachicola where their water for oysters went, to the lawns of Atlanta. The water side of the JEA is making money and is projected to grow. The investment business community shares my views. According to the Wall Street Journal, an article entitled "Mining the Scarcity Boom," water has become a critical commodity, much hotter than petroleum, especially now. As Charles Reinhardt, Chief Investor Officer of Morgan Stanley, stated, we think water might be the most important commodity story of the 21st century. Water is finite. No one is selling their water. In fact, the trend is not to privatize utilities at all, but to actually municipally own them. No wise city loses control over its water. In conclusion, the 4-way test is a powerful lens to apply to the JEA situation. Looking backwards, the final question in the 4-way test is it beneficial to all concerned? Clearly, it was not. However, I am incredibly optimistic about the future of the JEA with the leadership of John Baker and Bobby Stein and Marty Lanahan. I am confident that their leadership will pass Rotary's 4-way test. It's hard to believe that I've been in office less than a year, and I can't thank you enough for having me today, and I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Randy. Can you, sorry,
Yeah, I can hear you now.
took me a second to unmute. So thank you for an amazing presentation and for your leadership. I know I've been watching the chat function and we do have a number of questions.
Okay.
Sherry, are you able to put a few of them out for us?
Yes, President Tom, a couple of questions here. They're asking if we can get a link for updates on the investigation or any additional information for our website and videos.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I'm waiting to receive an update from Steve Busey today. He actually heard that I was giving this presentation. He goes, wait, I need to give you this information. I will, the minute I get that, what comes in, I'll send that over to you, Sherry.
Okay, another question is, do you feel that Mayor Curry was involved in the JEA scandal?
I think there's been a lot of assumptions that if not him, someone in his administration. And I can tell you, as of this date, we have not. We're following the evidence, and at this time, there is no evidence of that.
Okay, the other question is, do you have any confidence in the integrity of the City Office of Legal Counsel?
I think I mentioned early on that it's impossible for one person to represent all these different entities without, there's clearly a conflict of interest. There's no way you can represent all these entities, just no way. And I think this JEA issue has highlighted that. So I'm sure we're going to be looking at that going forward as to whether one person can represent all these entities.
Okay, a couple of members are noting that you're doing a wonderful job for us and we very much appreciate your service. They're asking how long is your term and will you run again?
My term is 4 years, and the way I am addressing this is how I'm operating. Number one, I don't think if you're constantly worried about your next run, it's very difficult to do the job at hand. So I am focused on doing what's right now.
Very good. Okay, Howard Dell is asking, is the JEA Vogel liability manageable? Please explain and quantify.
One of the things that's come out of this investigation is we think that it is. We're getting more information along those lines, and I think when the new leadership of the JEA is gonna put Paul McElroy back in place on an interim basis, and I think he would tell you that it absolutely is a manageable liability for sure.
Okay. I just want to remind everyone, if you have additional questions, please enter them in the chat area. We have about a minute left. Okay, here's another question from Jenny Jett. The onset of this was extremely swift. Would procedural changes help prohibit, at minimum, the speed by which a future attempt may be made?
Yeah, I think we're putting roadblocks in to prevent this from being able to happen again. It looked very quickly because we knew about it in a very short period of time. But as we during the investigation, as I said, it was all put in place back in 2018. They had been working on it for some time. So I think we're going to see, number one, the appointment of people on the JEA board is going to make a huge difference. If the city council can remove JEA appointees, then this would have never happened.
Okay. President Tom, we are concluding the questions in the chat feature. Many of our Rotarians are thanking Randy for her great work, and this was a wonderful presentation.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Randy. I appreciate all you do, your leadership, your love for our city. We talk about this a lot, and I think it is truly something we all strive for, that our children would love this community as much as we do, and they would hope to return and plant their seeds here, that they would raise their children in this community. And we're so grateful for your leadership and for your commitment and for all you do. So thank you for presenting today. I also want to thank everyone who's working so hard behind the scenes. We are all eagerly looking forward to the time when we can meet in person. And as we begin to open up, our businesses are starting to welcome clients again. We're so grateful for that. We're also looking forward to just being together in person. And I want to thank you as the lead volunteer of this organization. It so warms my heart. I talk to a lot of you by phone often, and it never fails when I hang up. I think I'm so grateful to be the lead volunteer for such a wonderful organization with so many wonderful volunteers and leaders. So many thanks to you. I want to invite all of you to join us on our next Rotary Zoom at noon on May 11th. Our own Bobby Brown will introduce astronaut Shane Kimbrough. Shane is one of 48 active American astronauts. In 2016 and 2017, he served as the commander of the International Space Station. At the end of this month, America will launch the first U.S. space launch from our soil in 9 years. Shane will walk us through the process and talk about the newest SpaceX rocket and capsule. This is one you don't want to miss. So to everyone there, thank you very much, Randy, for your leadership. Thank you. I look forward to seeing everyone back here on May 11th. Also, one last thing, new member orientation will be directly following this meeting. So please stay on if you're signed up for a new member orientation. Again, thank you so much.